Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing my official review for A Quiet Place Part 2. I finally was able to see this film, and not only see this film, but actually go to a physical movie theater for the first time in over 8 months. But before going into my review, please make sure that you smash that like button, line up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and make sure that you are subscribed with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video goes live on the channel. So yes, finally, I have been able. Finally, I feel like I feel like The Rock right now in doing this review. Finally, Odin has gone back to the theater, and it really did feel that way with me and the one other person that was in there with me watching this film. I saw this at an early showing. It was around was a 12:50 start time, which is unfortunately one of the earliest times that I can actually see a movie near me. I'm used to being back in New Orleans, where typically you can see movies starting in the AM, 11 a.m. showings being usually the earliest during the week, and then usually like 10 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. showings on the weekend. So it's always been kind of hard for me to see movies in general, because that 3 p.m., 4 p.m. start for most of the theaters here just doesn't really work very well for my schedule, especially now with baby Thor in the world, which is the main reason why I have not been able to actually go to a theater. But now that he is at daycare, I am actually able to be like, oh, I can squeeze a movie in before having to pick him up towards the end of the day. And so very happy that the first film that I was able to see this way was A Quiet Place Part 2. This is a follow-up to the 2018 original film, A Quiet Place. This is, of course, directed by John Krasinski, starring John Krasinski in the first film and his wife, real-life wife, Emily Blunt. And also a couple of really great, very solid child actors as well. Millicent Simmonds, who plays their child's, their young daughter, who happens to be deaf, who is also deaf in real life. So I thought that that was actually kind of a cool thing to see. Someone who actually lives out and has to experience that in their everyday life, able to actually showcase that on the big screen. I thought was awesome. And then Noah Jupe, who has been in other films. If you see his face, you're like, oh yeah, I've probably seen that kid and some other things before. Again, a very, very solid child actor right there. And I thought he also was very good in that first one. And then the second movie, obviously, spoilers, I guess, because if you've not seen the first film, some of these things might be spoilers for you. But obviously in the first film, by the very end of the film, John Krasinski's character dies. And one of the cool things I liked about this sequel is that it actually starts off almost as a prequel. It actually starts off with this sequence of day one, right? The day that the aliens, the monsters first arrive, and what it was like for everybody freaking out, trying to figure out how things work. And I thought that was a really cool sequence to have, and it actually makes me like it even more, seeing that when Krasinski was asked about this, he actually said one of the reasons why he's making these movies is almost as a love letter to his kids, right? He loves movies, he loves cinema, and so he's making these stories focusing specifically on family and on family relations. Oh my goodness, it's so good to see a movie and a story that actually focuses on that actually shows a dad in a very positive light, that shows moms in a positive light, motherhood in a positive light, even the midst of all of this, guess what? They have a child. So I think that there's a lot of really great pro-life and very pro-family messages in these stories. And so that, I think, is something that I'm very much drawn to, because I think me and many others are just so tired of just the very negative nature of modern day filmmaking. But just knowing that opening sequence, that kind of prequel sequence, was added into the film because he wanted to continue that aspect of this being a love letter. And again, having him be on screen and having him being able to be at his son's baseball game and stuff like that, I thought that was a really nice added touch. And it also happened to be pretty good for the story too, because it helped us to realize what was happening in the very beginning and how people were reacting. And of course, it also helps to set up a character that we meet in this universe, in this film, a new character played by Cillian Murphy, who, of course, as you all know, no matter what movie he's in, he is fantastic. He is a solid actor. So I was very happy to see him in this movie. One of the other things, though, I really enjoyed, other than just the story, and again, the very kind of, pro-family messaging that exists in this story, is the character played by Cillian Murphy, because it really just shows that there are these different people that exist, right? In the first film, all we really know is this one family, right? All we really know is how this one family is living. In the second film, we now get to see how other people have been affected and impacted by this. So we get to see, of course, Cillian Murphy, who is one of the persons who has survived, but he's lost his family along the way. We then also get to see these other people who have kind of really not even survived, but have just basically gone nuts, have basically gone insane. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic for them to add to the story about how you have these roamers, right? These individuals who are just really creepy people who, again, have kind of given in to the madness of the world and are therefore going to treat other humans in a different way. It's almost like they've become like cannibalistic in certain respects, and kind of really creepy too. And I thought it was a very nice touch. Speaking of creepiness, this film continues with the strengths of the first movie, where they are really able to sell the creepiness of the world that they live in, right? Where you have to be incredibly quiet because these aliens cannot see. These aliens can only perceive where people are based on sound. They have very hypersensitive hearing. And I thought, again, that they did a very good job of making that seem like very realistic. Now, I know a lot of people have had issues with this universe and with this movie because for them, they're like, I don't know, I have questions about the dynamics of how this would work. But I think that for the world that they are building and for the rules that they are setting in this universe, I think they actually do a pretty good job at following those rules. And I've kind of said that before. This is one of my issues with the Tomorrow War, is that when you set up certain rules and then you don't follow them, or the rules themselves are kind of counterintuitive, or just don't make sense, right? That's typically where I have issues in the storytelling, where for this one, I think if you sat down and had a piece of paper and broke things down, you might be able to find some flaws and issues with the overall logic of the story. But I honestly thought that from like at least the main perspective of seeing it and just experiencing it for the first time, you really don't feel that way. You really feel just the tension because everything is just so quiet. One of the biggest issues I had watching this movie was that the theater that I was at, it was a UEC theater, the first time I'd ever been. It's kind of like a smaller regional chain, and it's in various states across the country. So I guess maybe not regional, but a much smaller movie chain. One of the biggest issues I had, though, was that there was like this buzzing sound going on the entire time, and it was just very, very distracting, especially in a movie like this. I think if it was a bigger action film where there's not a lot of quiet moments, you wouldn't have noticed it. But in this film, silence is such an important factor. It's such an important part of the story. And so when you have nothing going on, whether you are hearing this from the deaf daughter's perspective, where it's just complete silence or very muffled silence, or if you're just hearing it in silence in general because it's a quiet moment building tension, having that buzzing sound kind of disrupted it sometimes, but luckily the movie is just so visually powerful, and so kudos to the cinematographer, kudos to the production design. Again, I think the world that they were able to build here looked really, really cool. Having that upped production budget, the first film was made for $17 million, which is still very impressive that the film was made for that much. This movie still also impressive, made between $55 and $61 million for its production budget, so definitely a lot more than the original, and that obviously I think could really be shown in the visual effects used for the monsters, but it was still really nice to look at visually. And speaking of the monsters, I thought that was another really awesome strength of the movie, was that the visual effects were actually looking pretty good. You all know I'm kind of a CGI snob, and so the fact that I was looking at the monsters and their design and the way that they interacted with the world, and I thought it looked great. There were some really great sequences, especially where you have characters that are in focus and out of focus in the background. You see these creatures, and I think that absolutely helps with kind of building up the realistic nature of these creatures when it's not just them in their beautiful CGI glory looking pristine in 2K, 4K resolution with very little distortion. It's like, well, that actually doesn't work all the time, because if they're in a real world background and the background doesn't look nearly as pristine, there is this very sharp this very sharp comparison and this very sharp contrast that you see between them, and it can be very distracting. The monsters in this film, I thought really blended well with the world overall. So again, there's a lot of really great things about this film. This is definitely one of my top 3 films of the year so far, based on the films that I've seen. I think I still like Nobody a bit more as far as an actual film is concerned. I think that's probably still my favorite movie of the year, but this is definitely up there for my second or third favorite movie of the year. The big issue that I have that makes me not give this a full A grade, though, is actually the ending, because the ending to me came about a little bit abruptly. I typically am used to films being able to really build up to their ending. And for this one, there is a build up, but normally there is a release, right? Normally there is this catharsis moment, I guess you say, like you build up to this moment, the moment happens, and then there's, a very short, maybe 10, 15-minute sequence after that where things start to play out and kind of set up for whether it's going to be another movie or whether it's just ending the story and to kind of give you some closure. And this didn't really have that. It just kind of ended. And I was, it was kind of odd because it's a 90-minute or so movie. So it's only about an hour and a half film, not a very long one, which I think does very well for this type of storytelling. And it's very clear that they have kind of left it open to make more films in the franchise. I would not be surprised if they end it with part 3. Personally, I'd be fine with that. I think that would make a very solid trilogy, especially with John Krasinski, if he continues to be behind the project. Though I would say I would very much like to see Krasinski actually even make a prequel to this story. I would like to actually see more of that world in day 1 and day 2. I think it was very interesting and compelling. And obviously the drama is so much more highly elevated because instead of it just being people who've been living with these creatures and figuring things out for a year or so, in that case, it would be people trying to figure things out, and a lot more people at that, people screaming, people not quite getting things right away. I think that would be really cool nonetheless. One of the biggest criticisms that I've also heard from the people who don't like this movie or don't like the story is, of course, the fact that we find out in this film, so again, some spoilers here, that these creatures can't swim. That these creatures cannot swim and that they drown relatively quickly. And so the comment that's been made is, well, don't you think that the world wouldn't have fallen to these creatures? Don't you think that we would have figured that out pretty quickly? And I understand that point to an extent. But then again, in the world that they've built, and especially with this film, when they show at that very beginning, what you see here is you see people who are just going chaotic, who are just freaking out. And I think that obviously, adds to the realism of the universe that's being built here, that you wouldn't have people thinking things through. Really, the only person shown to be thinking things through is John Krasinski's character when he realizes, oh, they're affected by sound. They're attracted to sound. And I think that is something, too, that is very specific to this type of storytelling. Not to mention, we're dealing here with an alien invasion, which is not necessarily the most realistic thing in the first place. So the fact that they indeed establish that people are freaking out and not really having a lot of time to process things, I think still makes that work where they have that revelation towards the very end. But yeah, it does also, I think, kind of expand this universe, because what about the people who've already been living on islands, right? What about the state of Hawaii, right? What about that? Like, are there going to be creatures that have fallen to that island? Like, is that something that has already been pre-established? What I like about it is that it does seem to kind of just expand this world a little bit more and make you realize, we are just living from this one family's perspective, but that does not mean that this is the only family, right? I think the island revelation at the very end shows, hey, there are probably several other groups in the world that are living out this normal everyday life, who have very little interactions with these creatures, who have very little interactions with the things going on. And I think that that's something that they could really explore in part 3, or even a prequel to this, or obviously, there's also talk apparently about Jeff Nichols getting involved doing a spin-off set in this universe. So it'll be interesting to see how this universe gets built, because I personally am a pretty big fan of it. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give this film an A-. And again, the reason why I don't love this movie nearly as much as the first one is because for me, the ending just felt just a little bit abrupt. It's been a while since I've seen the first movie, but I still think this is a very worthy sequel. Picks up not just with the prequel moments, but also picks up really with the events of the last movie and moves forward. I like the introduction of Cillian Murphy's character as being this dad who is, dealing with loss and doesn't want to help people because he knows the kind of crazy people that exist in this world who have just gone mad, given into the madness of the world around them. And so he understands that you can't really trust people in this, but he also is still human. He also still has these memories of this family with Emily Blunt's character, and also, of course, with John Krasinski's kids and all this stuff. And I think that is something that was a really good addition to the movie. And another really cool thing about this, too, is that typically in movie making nowadays, right, we've been very critical of this. It usually shows, okay, only, female characters are going to be the strong ones. They're the only ones that can save people. What I love about this film is that this is a lot more realistic, because everyone is saving everyone at one point or another. And so I like that, because anyone who would claim, oh, white savior moment, you really can't, because you see that there are so many other moments that the other characters are saving each other. And again, I think that makes it a little bit more realistic in that this family is working together as a group, and they're all going to add these different things to the characters. And the mom is not the strongest character. though she is strong, right? The daughter is not the strongest character, though she is strong, but she also needs help, right? She has to be literally saved by Cillian Murphy's character. And I think that type of storytelling is so much more realistic and also really is well appreciated, especially in the wake of what Hollywood is doing with stories today. So anyway, I know that was a lot of information, but it's been a long time since I've actually gone to a theater. So very excited to be doing that. And I'm planning to see a couple more movies, hopefully in the next week or so, and give some reviews for y'all. I might actually even, I've been having my AMC Premiere membership for months now, been paying for it, haven't seen anything, as I said, in 8 months. So you do the math on that. It's just me giving AMC money. So I think I'm actually going to end up going to see Black Widow, so that way I can come back and give an official review for the channel, because as I've always said, before talking crap about a movie or a book or anything for that matter, I feel like you have to have seen it, because then you're able to give more of a full perspective on it. So be on the lookout for that, and hopefully I can do a vlogging video review as well. But unfortunately, one last thing, so the review is now over at this point, but as y'all remember, I did have a vlogging camera, my DJI Osmo Pocket, which y'all helped to fund a couple years back. And apparently it's dead. Apparently it just won't work anymore. Every time I plug it in, it just has this random blinking green light, but it won't actually power on. And so it might be dead. But luckily I did pick up a Insta360 Go 2 not too long ago with the plan of using that, especially for my out and abouts, going to Best Buy, eventually when I would go back to Best Buy post-pandemic and everything. And so I think I might be able to use that. But the microphone situation is a little bit iffy. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, thank you all very much for your love, for your patience. It's great to be able to go back to an actual physical theater. And what have you been watching? Have you seen A Quiet Place Part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below, especially that pinned comment, because that's probably where I'll be able to see the comment most of all. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure you smash that like button, line up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. It really does help and mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And because I still have not added you to the shout out video, I wanted to take a time to shout out Mondo Spieler, who is a new member on Patreon, and also Goblin Squatch, who is my first member over on locals.com. That's right, I have a locals.com now, and if you want to check out to find information about what you can get with a subscriber membership over there, go ahead and check out one of the pinned posts that has the long explanation about what is included and why I ended up choosing that price and why I ended up choosing that specific level, which is very similar to what you find on Patreon, Subscribestar, and think about it. Anyway, you guys are great. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my July Patreon and Subscribestar members: Andrew Hoyle, Biffer de Hobbit, Brian P., Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Laura the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina B, and Tina Bojan. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon, and also to my Subscribestar members: Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for being here today. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single live stream and video on the channel, please make sure to check out the links in the description of ways that you can support me over on Patreon and Subscribestar as well. It gives you access to things like giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, and digital codes. Also, access to a podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where we have a lot of fun. We also answer Q&A questions as well. And also you might get access to the Chosen of Valhalla level, which gives you access to a once-a-month podcast exclusively where I bring on you to the main channel with everyone else who is at the level, and we all just talk about movies, pop culture, and tons of fun stuff like that. And also, of course, Tina, who is the Empress of the Universe, is going to give us tons of reviews of movies and also maybe a couple of awesome rants here and there as well. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure you go ahead and check out those links. Again, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.